Well, for more on youth unemployment and that's the crisis that it's brought, we're now joined via Zoom by youth activist Sivuyile Ngcanga. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's International Workers' Day. It's supposed to be a day of celebration, but for many young people who've never worked a day in their life and others who've had very limited work opportunities, this is probably a difficult day for them to be reflecting on.
Yes, indeed it is. Because Workers' Day, for them, it doesn't mean anything for them. But when you look at what the workers actually fought for, was just to get like 8 hours of work, 8 hours of recreation, and 8 hours of rest. But even that will become null and void in the near future. Because if you look at how much people earn in their 8-hour salary, it's not enough to sustain their lifestyles and sustain their families. Because I remember when I was growing up, my mother was a teacher. And from her teacher salary, she could take care of our family of 4. My father was also unemployed, so she was taking care of me, her, and my brother. And from her salary, she was able to take us to multiracial schools, which we call the Model C schools, which is was known as the better type of education, and just put us through school and everything. But as the years are going, the teacher salary can't even continue doing just that basic taking care of your family. So now what we're looking at is the fact that the teachers and other laborers and other workers are going to have to put in more hours just to take care of their families. And the more hours that they want to put in, we're breaking actually the back of what we're celebrating today, which is Workers' Day, and them actually just only putting in 8 hours of work. But with that being said, I feel as though what's most important is actually to talk about the solutions when it comes to problems that we're facing as the youth of today's South Africa, and how we actually can create employment.
Well, let's talk about those solutions a little bit. Yeah, let's talk about those solutions a little bit. Yeah. I know we've had chats in the past, and it's either these things are falling on deaf ears or they're just impossible to implement. Yeah.
So it does seem as though they're falling on deaf ears. There is things that the government is also putting in place, and even private sector is actually putting in place in order to try and listen to the youth or listen to entrepreneurs. But also, with that being said, I'm always blaming government, I'm always blaming the private sector on job creation, but I also want to speak to the citizens of South Africa on actually creating employment for the youth. And that is through buying proudly South African products. You know, I just came from a traditional wedding today. A friend of mine, Aphiwe Bukani, who forms part of the marketing team of McDonald's, was getting married to Siva Mabuya, who's a famous actress. I'm wearing traditional clothes. I'm buying proudly South African clothing. The top that I'm wearing is from a local girl here in East London who does these Team Jesus t-shirts. And I'm also wearing cheaper streetwear clothing just to support our South African products. Because the more we're supporting our South African products, the more we can actually create demand for them, and the more that those brands can actually create employment for our people. So yeah, we want to always talk about what our government can do, what the private sector can do, but we also should look at what us South African citizens can do in order to help our people, and that is by buying South African and making slight changes, as knowing that, okay, I shouldn't buy this butter, I should rather buy this butter because it's probably South African. I should buy this milk because this milk is imported and this milk is not. So there's few adjustments that we can create. I know when I go to the township, I make sure that, okay, let me fill up my tank in the township. Let me buy from a restaurant in the township just to support that business, just to create a revenue for them. So there's a certain aspect that I want to give to the South African citizen that we should start working on, and that is by supporting our people and buying proudly South African products. But also now to touch on our unemployment the unemployment is increasing, and the more that the unemployment is increasing, are we even having the the AI generation that's being currently ushered in. And we need to understand that we're already facing a crisis of unemployment. Now, us ushering in artificial intelligence is even creating that deficit even further. So we know we're heading to a technological generation. So with that being said, we need to now think, what are we going to do with the people that we're making their jobs redundant? So now this is when I start thinking about things like universal basic income. I used to be against universal basic income because I knew that if people get money for doing nothing, it will just create a serious crisis amongst our people. But now I'm of a different opinion because I've looked at both sides of the pros and the cons. And I've realized that there's a certain way we can actually use that universal basic income in order to create more jobs for our people. And that's simply by capping the age, the retirement age to maybe 40. And only the people that are above the age of 40 can receive that universal basic income. And so if they move out of the workspace and they move out of the jobs, then you have more jobs that are created for the youth. Because we cannot take away the fact that working, getting employed is very important. It's not just important because you're working for money, but it's also the discipline that it teaches you. Waking up, making your own money, and it gives you a good lesson on the importance of any rand that is earned by you and even the usage of it. But that shouldn't only end there. We should also teach financial literacy in school so that the children can actually know how to stretch their coins and know how to stretch their money and know how to use their money, how to save their money, how to invest their money. So there's a lot that we can discuss and that we can speak on, but I always like to focus on the solutions so that we may leave these type of interviews with something to ponder about and something to think about, because we can't continue just blaming only the government, but we can come up with solutions on our own, and we can make a few adjustments and changes in our daily lives in order to include South African products, in order to create more employment for our people. Thank you.
Sivuyile, when you speak to young people, what is the advice that you give them? We've been talking about private sector, employers, etc. What about young people that are very excited about writing matric this year, and next year a number of realities are going to start to hit them, particularly if they don't get into a tertiary institution, and some that are graduating, another reality is going to hit to them because they thought they were guaranteed employment by getting a post-matric qualification. What kind of advice are you giving them? How should they be approaching the coming years where maybe getting a job isn't as easy as they had hoped or thought?
Yeah. So, as you know me by now, I like discussing solutions. So I have even siblings that are currently in high school, and I preach to them all the time, and I tell them, look guys, you need to start thinking, what about your guys' future? Because when we were at school, we used to know that we guaranteed employment with this and so companies and stuff like that. Now, because we're seeing what's currently happening, you guys need to think of solutions. You know you're heading into an AI generation. You know that employment is getting scarce. So what are the solutions? And I always feel as though the youth have the solutions because, as I said, just me alone, like I have like 7 to 8 to 11 business plans, but it's implementing them and putting them into practice. So I say that every problem can be met with a solution, but that's only if we're looking for the solutions. So I always try to motivate them to look at problems differently, because most people see problems and they just want to shun away from them and they just want to push them away. But each problem is always an opportunity, because if you realize that most of the people that are rich in the world and most of the people that have created businesses is through seeing an opportunity and seeing lack or meeting a problem and coming with a solution. So I always try to make them focus and think, what can you do with the education that you have? Because yes, you might have studied like me, you studied mechatronics and you were working in the manufacturing industry. But what else can you do with your qualification? With the mind that you have now applied into your study, you can also use to apply elsewhere. You know, in my field, I was taught problem solving.
Sivuyile, we're going to have this conversation again and more regularly, because we've run out of time today. But I think you did leave us with some food for thought, and perhaps we can pick up again in the near future on this last part of the conversation. But thank you so much. Always good to talk to you. Always inspiring. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you so much, man.
Okay.
Cheers.
Thank
Happy
you.
Workers' Day.
Same to you. All right, that's Sivuyile Ngcanga, who's a youth employment activist, always focused on solutions, and especially on a day like today where so many young people are unemployed.